Okay.
I'm here to address the Arlington Police Chief's statements that the incident that occurred at Timberview High School was not, quote unquote, not a bullying incident, and he seeks to remove that from the narrative. With all due respect, I am not a member of law enforcement. However, from my understanding, the role of law enforcement is not to steer an investigation to fit a particular narrative. And it is my firm belief that if one is seeking to change the narrative, he or she will only seek and provide information that fits that particular narrative. However, I called this meeting today because I have an extensive amount of evidence to the contrary. There was pervasive bullying at Timberview High. So that's basically all I will say about that. I do have evidence of bullying there at Timberview High by Zacchaeus Selby. So I would request or suggest actually that any citizen, any parent of any student there at Timberview, if they are interested in protecting their child's safety, they should demand that Timberview High takes bullying seriously. They should demand that Timberview High address the bullying there on campus, because that is the only way they will be assured of their children's safety. Law enforcement on campus is not preventative. Metal detectors are preventative to a certain extent. However, unless Timberview High gets serious and takes a stance against bullying, instead of pretending that it does not exist, these parents should still have a concern about the safety of their children. And also, since the chief seems to have a bit of an issue in discovering evidence of bullying, I have personally collected information, and I also have set up a tip line for anyone who would like to call in, and anyone who has been bullied there at Timberview High School. They can call the tip line. It's 8-BULLY-9118. That is 8, just a moment, let me get the rest of the numbers, I apologize. It is 828-559-88. So that's 8-BULLY-9118. They can call the tip line, and they can choose to remain anonymous if they choose so. Obviously, the school will not be able to address any issues that are presented anonymously. However, we encourage any student, any parent who has a student at Timberview High who has experienced bullying to reach out to us and leave a message on the tip line. That's 8-BULLY-9118.
Again, I'm Mark Clayton, and Defense Counsel is here simply to urge the Arlington Police Department and any other officials to refrain from making statements similar to those that were made on last Thursday at the town hall meeting in Mansfield. Blanket statements like that, without having all the facts of the case, are unfairly prejudicial. This investigation is still underway. An independent investigation is being done. It is impossible for anyone to know all that was involved, let alone what precipitated the incident that occurred. We only hope that Mr. Simpkins is afforded due process and a fair trial. That's achieved when a full investigation is complete and by preserving and presenting all the evidence. And we can preserve our evidence by keeping it confidential, especially from a group of people who could potentially serve as jury panel members. That's going to be the #1 reason why we have to protect the evidence in this case and refrain from doing or making statements such as those that were made last week. Thank you.
So out of the evidence that you have, Attorney Cole, obviously you don't want to share it, but can you tell us at least what's the most quote-unquote incriminating evidence that you have that will help Mr. Simpkins' case? Can you share something with us? Because we've heard it, but we've seen nothing that shows that there was bullying going on. What is so critical in this case to help you defend Mr. Simpkins?
First of all, I would say that there's evidence that clearly and definitively refutes the narrative that bullying was not an issue.
Unfortunately, we're unable to share that particular evidence because there are pending charges. And any evidence that could be presented in the court should be first presented in the court before it's presented to the public. And we're all under ethical obligation to ensure that the evidence is preserved. And that's the reason why we cannot share specifically what those incidents are, but can say that there is evidence to controvert those statements.
Can you tell us, is it text message, social media, video? What are we talking about if you can't give us those particular details?
All of the above. All of the above. All of the above.
Tell me, what's above? Tell me what you're talking about.
Text messages, social media, video. Emails, yes. Snapchats, all of that.
Kevin, Mark, a question. You mentioned the bullying part of Chief Jones' statement. Can you say anything about the second half of that statement, which referenced the high-risk activity that your client was allegedly doing?
When Mr. Simpkins was brutally attacked, he was sitting in a classroom doing his schoolwork. That is not high-risk activity. He was simply sitting in class doing his schoolwork.
Do you know if Zacchaeus Stelby will be charged for that brutal attack?
He certainly should be.
We have reached out to Arlington Police Department about filing the report, and they called last week, but they have not gotten back to me on when I can provide Timothy a chance to make his statement to show what happened. And he sustained injuries that were pretty significant, and that needs to be talked about.
Can you update us on your client's status? We know that he was released on home detention. Can you is he still doing classwork? Can you give us an update on what's going on with him?
We're working on getting him, he's going to be doing things online, so we're working on getting him registered this week so he can resume his classwork.
What's the narrative? You mentioned a narrative that law enforcement shouldn't steer toward another narrative. What is that narrative that you believe they're steering it toward in this case?
I was quoting the chief where he specifically stated that bullying, he wanted to remove that from the narrative. He wanted to remove that narrative from the equation, is what he said. So I was simply referring to the chief's words where he wanted to simply abandon the fact that Zacchaeus Selby was a bully. That's the narrative I was speaking of.
Do we know, are there any official school records for complaints of bullying involving your client?
I will say this, and in dealing with situations with other school districts, I have found that the districts don't often keep records. There should be records. I will say that. Whether there are records that currently exist or not, I am uncertain.
Can you tell us of any plans to depose any school officials about bullying when it comes to this case at all? Or is that
I believe we're too. It's premature at this point. We're early into this.
The evidence you have of bullying, is it just between Simpkins and Selby, or are there other students involved?
Other students.
Can you say how many, or?
We can't at this point.
Just kind of open-ended question. I think maybe address this in the opening statements, but I guess for those who have seen this, can you explain why the narrative of bullying, or the lack of it, evidently from the APD's perspective, at least as of last Thursday night, is harmful to your client? Can you wish you were seeing this and wondering, why is this prompt a press conference? To that you said what?
Yeah, for sure. The number one thing is that those statements were made in Mansfield, which is in Tarrant County, where the pool of jurors would come from. When we select any jury panel, we want to ensure that they are hearing this with fresh ears and not with any influence. And when you get statements like that, especially from a police chief, people are going to tend to just run with it. When this investigation is just not done, and our independent investigation is shown so much more than what he is saying. And so it's more about the influence of who made that statement, which is why we're urging the officials to refrain from making those type of statements. We don't have control over the media. For that reason, we have to protect and preserve our evidence so that he is able to have a fair trial. And as you all are aware, he has been charged with assault cases, and so defenses to those could also include injuries and things that he sustained and pressures or anything that he may have been under.
Any plans to call for a change of venue because of the chief's remarks?
Not at this time. We're still super early.
Any plans to ask the court for a gag order?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
As soon as
That
the
will
cases
be
are
done.
filed,
Okay.
we'll get that. Yeah, those motions will be filed as soon as these cases are filed.
And how soon can we get that so-called presentation that we were supposed to see today?
No sooner than a trial. No, yeah, no.